I'm Dale Bonar. Welcome back to the second session of this learning opportunity of an emergency succession plan. Part 2 is designed to involve you directly in the discussion of plan elements. And as such, having a facilitator in the room with you to guide the discussion is invaluable. The following PowerPoint video can be suspended by your facilitator at appropriate points for you as a group to conduct your discussions. If you have not had time to review the homework materials assigned in Part 1, the questionnaire, and the model emergency succession plan, please do so before proceeding with your discussions. Let's look at what we'll cover. First, how will you address the different types of leadership interruptions, which could be temporary or permanent? What would your leadership needs be for either a short term, say less than 3 months, versus a long term, less than 6 months or even greater, absence? How do you identify a person to step into the leadership position? And would they be an acting interim leader or a permanent replacement? Finally, who will oversee that transition? So let's take a brief review of the purpose of an emergency succession plan. First, it clarifies the primary responsibility of key positions. It identifies interim leaders. It guides communications with stakeholders. It specifies the authorities and responsibilities of all parties, and it updates annually. Let's consider the roles and responsibilities of board and leadership during the development of your plan. The board of directors owns the process of developing the plan. It provides the strategic vision for the organization. It evaluates the competency of potential acting directors. And it establishes and evaluates the organizational leadership pipeline. The executive director provides input to the board and planning committee, educates the board on the current state of the organization and external elements affecting the mission. For example, these elements might include future trends in funding and community needs and perceptions or other relevant issues. The ED provides input on competencies of existing staff members and their potential as future leaders. The ED also works to develop at least one potential successor who would be available for either a planned or an unplanned loss of the leader. The leadership team are those staff directors most directly involved in management activities in their particular areas of responsibility. Their contributions to plan development will generally mimic those of the executive director, including input, the current state and future trends in their own specialty areas, and input on competencies of staff they oversee. In addition, they are often involved in a robust personal development effort and can provide suggestions in the type of training they would like to have should they be on the list of potential successors. This next section is your hands-on work session and involves the facilitated discussion of the questionnaire elements. Your facilitator will lead the participants slide by slide through these 6 question areas. In your supplemental materials, you have handouts of the questions that you can use to jot down ideas and take notes as your discussion proceeds. The goal here will be to reach consensus on the decisions you wish to include in your specific plan. At appropriate points, your facilitator will interrupt the video so all of you can participate in their evaluation and discussion. The first section would be procedures. Who is responsible for implementing the plan? This should be someone who is knowledgeable of operational activities and can move the process quickly and efficiently. In most instances, this would be an engaged board member or sometimes a small committee, such as the executive officers. What outcomes would you expect of the plan administrator? Are they tasked with making the interim decisions on hiring or on assigning reallocated duties? Or are they expected to bring proposed actions to the board for their final approval? In considering potential internal appointees, which internal candidates for acting ED would be considered? This might be a different person depending on whether a short-term or long-term acting director is needed, and will depend on both the organization's and the individual's situation at the time. And finally, in what order would the internal candidates be considered? Consider the board oversight of this process. To whom does the acting executive director report? Typically, this would be the board president, although it could be the executive committee or a designated oversight committee. What decisions can the acting director make on their own? Would these be the same as the authority held by the current executive director? Or does the board feel there should be more active board involvement in some decisions? And what kinds of decisions would require board or other approvals? Let's consider a compensation adjustment. Will the acting executive director's pay be adjusted? This should take into account new or expanded activities required of an acting ED, as well as the current salary difference between the existing ED and the staff member replacing them. If so, how will that decision be made and by whom? The board president, an executive committee, or the whole board? Finally, communication plans. Think about who needs to be contacted and who's responsible for doing that. Consider those important stakeholders who should be notified, including conservation partners, donors, and in particular, your major donors, funders, and the community in general. How will these communications be dealt with? Will major stakeholders be contacted directly, whether by phone or face-to-face? Will they be contacted by target mailing or by some other manner appropriate for your community? This might be arranged differently depending on the length of time an acting director would need to serve, as well as the urgency of your ongoing organizational activities. Who is responsible? Will it be the board president or other board member, or can this be handled by existing staff? All of these decisions hinge on understanding what the executive director does in both day-to-day and long-range activities within the organization. You need to evaluate potential candidates against those duties. This is facilitated if you have a clear idea of what a success profile looks like in your organization. Your plan should clearly define the duties, responsibilities, skills, and expectations of the acting executive director. This will help in evaluating the potential internal candidates as well as give them guidelines to consider for their own personal development efforts. Elements which should be considered include a comprehensive job description, the core accountabilities of the position, the outcomes deliverables expected from an acting executive director, their education and experience, and the competencies that they would bring to the position. If your organization undergoes regular staff evaluations, the current leadership should have a good understanding of both past and current performance of those staff members who might be considered as potential internal successors. For a full evaluation of potential successors, you should consider conducting a 360-degree feedback assessment as well as a candidate self-assessment process. The Land Trust Alliance Learning Center has numerous resources for conducting these kinds of evaluation processes, as do many nonprofit organizational development websites. Okay, for the final plan preparation. Utilizing the decision reached by the participants during this workshop, the final plan can be assembled by incorporating those decisions into the emergency plan template provided to you as part of the workshop materials. The board should oversee the editing of this final plan and formally adopt it at a regular board meeting. And finally, we have summary recommendations for you. Utilize the guidance of an experienced facilitator to help you through the decision process. Include both long-term and emergency succession planning as an integral part of your regular strategic planning. Implement and review your plan on an annual basis. Thank you for participating in this learning workshop.